Right, recording.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Maxine Evis and I'm the Associate Dean for Education here in the Law Faculty at UTS. Thank you for joining us for this Migration Law and Practice webinar. I shall just leave it for a minute or so to let a few other people in, so we'll be commencing the webinar in a minute's time. Thanks very much.
I'm assuming we're live.
I'm just going to type a message asking whether everyone can hear us okay. So if you can, please give me a yes in the chat box. Excellent, that's great to know, thank you. Welcome everyone.
Thank you very much for indicating that you're able to hear us. We will start now because you've all been able to get here on time, so thanks very much. As I said at the commencement of this Migration Law and Practice webinar, my name is Maxine Evis and I'm the Associate Dean for Education here in the Faculty of Law at the University of Technology. I'd like to thank you all for putting some time aside to learn more about our graduate diploma in Migration Law and Practice. And we are very lucky to have Christine Giles, our program head, here to take us through the webinar. Before I do that though, as we always do as a tradition here at the University of Technology, I pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose land the University of Technology stands. We are very fortunate to be in a place of great knowledge and great tradition, and that is a very important part of how we manage and deliver our education programs. So it's great that you're able to join us if you're thinking about undertaking the graduate diploma this year in autumn or possibly in spring, or even just starting your research and thinking about a career change possibly into the migration law profession in following years. So, as I said, we are very, very lucky to have since the commencement of our graduate diploma, Christine Giles, who is the program head of our course. And Christine is highly experienced both in practice and as an academic, a course designer, and very much still at the front of the industry, very well connected to MARA, the Department of Migration Agents, and has made an enormous contribution to the course over the time that it has been running, including continual improvements in particular around online learning. So I'm going to hand over to Christine now. I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the education approach of the faculty here at UTS. So my colleagues are with me this evening. We will answer questions in the chat box, so please, or the Q&A box, so please post your questions in the Q&A box and we will answer those either offline, but if there are questions that we think would be helpful to all of you here this evening, we'll leave some time at the end to answer those questions. So thanks very much in Q&A box, and over to you, Christine. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome everyone for joining us. Just before we get started, I just wanted to launch a little poll to ask who amongst us has some experience in the migration area, and whether or not you're planning on becoming a migration advisor. So it's a good opportunity to have practice at a poll, because that's something that we do a lot of in our live online classes. And it's really safe environment for you to indicate your preference, because it's completely anonymous. Nobody knows which answer you've given. So thank you for voting really quickly. for the benefit of those who are watching the recording, sadly you can't see what's happening in the poll, so I shall commentate for you. So we've had over 80% vote, which is excellent, and about a third of our attendees tonight have no experience in the migration area, which is fine. You won't be on your own there. Most of our students, particularly in our first introductory subject, have no experience. And 80% of the attendees are planning, have definitely decided they would like to become a migration advisor, and 20%, well, we have someone enrolling as an elective, which is great. 20% still not quite sure. So I'll just share those results with those of you in the room, because that's the benefit of attending live. You actually get to see what's happening. And now I'll get started. Thank you for sharing that information. This session is being recorded. It's a webinar, so it's not quite the same as one of our Zoom meetings. Your chats and your Q&As are not made available to people who are watching the recording. Please feel free to ask a question at any time. You can pop it in the Q&A, or you can pop it in the chat box if you like. And as Maxine said, some of the questions will be answered as we progress. Others I'll leave for me a bit later. So as the slide says, becoming a migration agent starts with UTS. So we are one of the providers of one of the approved providers of the Graduate Diploma in Migration Law and Practice. Now, holders of current Australian legal practicing certificates do not have to do the full qualification. They don't have to have the graduate diploma to be able to register as a migration agent. And so if you're in the session with us tonight or watching the recording and you're a lawyer with a current practicing certificate, then you should look into applying for recognition for prior learning, because you can be exempt from our bookend subjects, the first and the last, which means you could finish this in just 4 subjects rather than 6. And something else that's about to happen is that lawyers with full practicing certificates, so unrestricted practicing certificates, are about to be excluded from the registration scheme. So we expect there'll be a few more lawyers who might be interested in providing migration advice who may actually be joining us. So for those of you who are not lawyers or who don't hold a full practicing certificate, then the graduate diploma is the first step. And once you have qualified, you then need to pass the independent Capstone Assessment. And you'll be pleased to know that our course actually includes a free Capstone preparation module to try to help you know what to expect and what you need to do to prepare to get through that next step after graduating with your graduate diploma. It is important, especially for those of you who are just exploring, that you are aware of all the other requirements that MARA imposes on becoming a registered migration agent. So you need to be an Australian citizen or Australian permanent resident. You need to be what's called a fit and proper person. So if you have a criminal history, there may be some issues there. You need to meet very, very high language proficiency. So we always recommend that you go and have a look at what's required before you embark on the graduate diploma. We wouldn't want you to get all the way through the program and then find that you weren't able to register because of one of the other requirements. So with some exceptions, anyone providing immigration assistance at the moment, at least until lawyers are excluded from the scheme, must be registered with the Migration Agents Registration Authority. It's a very serious criminal offence, carrying a term of imprisonment as a penalty to provide immigration assistance in Australia if you're not a registered migration agent. Or after March, when the lawyers are removed from the scheme, if you're not a lawyer with a full unrestricted practicing certificate. And as I've said, we are one of the accredited providers. It is one of the knowledge requirements. I'll talk a little bit more about the Capstone Assessment. There'll probably be some questions for it. And yes, it's some more information there about the other requirements, such as English language, police check, indemnity insurance, things like that. So why choose UTS? Our course is a really practical course. UTS prides itself on turning out practice-ready graduates, work-ready graduates. So it's a really practical course, and it is delivered entirely online, which means it's very helpful for people who are working or have busy lives, who don't have the time or are out away from campus, because our students join us from anywhere. Now, I head up the program. My background is both as a barrister for many years, but also as a registered migration agent, both for profit and not for profit. For profit, I worked for the Refugee and Immigration Legal Service as well as in private practice, and I was the delegate of the Immigration Ombudsman. I investigated migration complaints out of the Queensland office of the Commonwealth Ombudsman, and I've been a program head and a course convener in the Graduate Certificate, which was the predecessor to the Graduate Diploma, and of course now heading up this program. But in terms of the other staff, your other lecturers, your other teachers, they're all practitioners, they're all at the coalface now. So they are experts in their field, and it's really great to have people sharing their practical experience with you and their practical knowledge, and keeping up. They have to keep up day to day. They have to know what's going on, and they can share all that with you. So approach does combine theory with practice, and I'll talk a little bit more soon about how you would complete the course within a year if you wanted to. And yes, I've already mentioned our free capstone preparation module, and there really is a lot of flexibility because it's just a matter of logging in when it suits you, logging onto Canvas and working through the pages in the modules. So these are the 6 subjects in our course. So if you're not a lawyer with a current practicing certificate, unrestricted practicing certificate, and doing all 6 subjects, you would begin with Introduction to Migration Law. And that is very much a law for non-lawyers subject, where it teaches you everything you need to know to be able to understand and interpret migration legislation, to conduct research, and to draft legal documents, because we do lots of that. We do lots of letters of advice and submissions and file notes and memoranda. And you'll be learning all about that in that introductory subject, along with the fundamentals of our legal system, all about how law is made, and our doctrine of precedent, things like that. Australia's visa system, our second subject, is a companion subject to the first. And in that subject, you'll learn about all the different visa subclasses and classes that there are. Now, you're not expected to know everything about them as soon as you finish that course, because in the following 2 subjects, we look at each and every visa subclass, the practice and procedure in great detail. But in 78301, it's very much an overview, so you know what visas are available. And we look at some of the common concepts, aspects that are common to lots of different visa classes or subclasses, such as who can be included as a secondary applicant and whether sponsorship's available. And we look at how to make a valid application for a visa, because if it's not valid, it can't be considered by the department. And we look at what's required to make an effective visa application. At the end of that subject, we slot in citizenship. And we're very fortunate from Autumn, we're having a real expert join us from the faculty. Associate Professor Laurie Berg's joining us to take citizenship, which is really exciting for those of you who are beginning in autumn. As I said, the next 2 subjects look at each and every visa subclass in detail. We look at the criteria for each visa. So it builds very much on what you've done in the first 2 subjects. And that's one reason why we do not recommend that you try to take 3 subjects in the first session. Some students prefer just to take 1 subject in the first session, but if you do 78300 and 78301, then you're well placed to move on to the next subjects after that. 78304 is actually my favourite subject, and it's all about what can go wrong when people are dealing with the department. So it's if people get their visas refused, their visas cancelled, what we can do to help them, and how we can keep them out of immigration detention, hopefully. We look at the review options that are available, merits review and judicial review. And we also have a look at the role of the Commonwealth Ombudsman, because it's got a bit of an inside look there. There's lots of interesting things that I can share with you. And finally, our final subject is a very practical subject, so it's quite different from all the others. And it's very much about running your business and dealing with clients, ethical obligations, and I take a module on advocacy, helping you to prepare clients and prepare yourself for appearing before the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, for example. And there'll probably be a slide coming up, but students in the 78305 have the option of undertaking an approved internship, which is really successful. Almost half of our students choose that option, and all of them without exception. So what a wonderful experience it is. But you don't have to worry if you're not able to do an internship or you can't organise one. We do have an alternate assessment task for you, so you don't need to worry. Now, the heading says that you can complete in 6 months, but if you have a look at the little dots there, you'll see that we only offer 3 of our subjects in summer 2021. So if you wanted to complete in 12 months, then you could perhaps start with the first 2 subjects. You could consider doing the next 3 subjects in spring, and you could finish off with 78305 in summer session. Or you might prefer to skip summer session. You don't have to do summer session if you don't want to. Summer session is very intensive. So those of you who are looking at starting in autumn, I encourage that. We have a lot more time in autumn. You get a study break, and you get a week to do your first practice file task, and you get another week to do your oral component, and you get another week off without classes to do your second written practice file task. And you have swap back, and it's not quite as pressured. Summer session is crazy. We're just finishing up at the moment, and we don't get any of those breaks, and there's an overlap. Summer doesn't really actually finish before autumn starts. So if you want to give summer session and miss, that's fine. You can do 2 subjects in autumn, 2 in spring, and then you can do the final 2 subjects in the following autumn. Or you might want to do another permutation or combination. So if you want any advice from me, feel free to ask for it in terms of what you should enrol in. But I do strongly encourage you not to enrol in more than 2 subjects in your first session. Once you've nailed those, then you'll probably be quite confident to enrol in 3 subjects in spring session, but I wouldn't recommend it for when you're first starting off. Now here's a bit of a look at all our wonderful practitioner lecturers that are available. So as I said, Marina, young woman migration lawyer of the year, I think, doing lots of exciting things and has lots of exciting things to share with our students. In fact, she was on SBS Go Back to Where You Came From live. So we've got some good clips of that in when we do our refugee and humanitarian visa module, which Alison actually takes because she's a senior solicitor at RACS in Sydney. Tom is my offsider in that he's also on staff, and he's with you right through the program as I am, rather than just the weeks that he's actually teaching you a particular module. Alan has great experience as on the inside. He was a departmental officer, worked in compliance for a long time, so his knowledge of compliance powers and detention and things really exceptional, and I'll share that with you. He teaches with me in 78304. And as I said, Laurie's going to be taking citizenship from autumn, and you get me in lots of subjects. So basically all the ones that are pretty much law related. So judicial review, visa cancellation, advocacy. I take you for bridging visas to make sure you get that right, because if we mess up bridging visas for our clients, they can end up in detention. So I'll hand over to you, Maxine, to talk about our learning and teaching approach. Just give me a hoy when you want me to progress the slides, and I'll have a look in the chat and see if there's anything you're waiting for me. You're muted, Maxine.
You think by now I would have learned. That's part of getting used to being an online learner. As I said, there are quite some really good questions in the chat box and in the Q&A. If you can put them in the Q&A, it's probably a little bit easier for us to decipher. Some of those questions will be answered more at the end because we know that there are many of you that are wanting that same information. Some of you will have heard about the University of Technology. Some of you may have studied here or had family members or friends that have been to UTS. And if you do know anything about the university, you'll know that part of its brand really is the fact that we are a very practice-based university. We also talk about our teaching and learning as well as being very practice-based. We talk about it being very much aligned with the profession. So the profession in the migration world, profession in the legal world. We run an intellectual property course as well. So what that means for you as a student is the assessments that you are asked to do, the feedback that you receive on the assessments, the learning that you do is very much targeted to being a migration professional. So we don't have closed book exams, for example, because our way of designing our courses is very much about what you would be doing in practice, and particularly for a course such as the Graduate Diploma in Migration Law and Practice, it is all about being a professional in practice. And so we are very lucky, as Christine has given you information about the practitioners and the academics that teach into the program. So very much a skills-based course and about how you apply the knowledge using the skills to the work that you do. And again, what I think is also very helpful to know, and Christine has suggested that you have a look at the OMARA website, is that our course has been approved by OMARA, and we teach the course, of course, in line with what OMARA have identified as the competencies, what a migration professional needs to know, and our subjects are designed around that so that you are, as we say on the slide that you're looking at now, very much work ready. Practically oriented graduates. Well, we do say that when you go out into the workforce with a UTS degree, a UTS diploma, you can hit the ground running. So that's our philosophy of teaching. Thank you, Christine. So again, one of, I suppose, the trademarks of our course or our courses at UTS is about flexibility, particularly in the postgraduate space. So this is a postgraduate course. It's also an online course. Now, Christine and her colleagues were experts at online learning, designing of online courses way before we had ever heard of COVID. But of course, the experience that COVID has taught us as a university is what can be done in the online space to improve the students' experience. But what it means for you in the graduate diploma is that you're able to work around your professional and your personal life. So we recognise that, as I said, particularly postgraduate students, students with family commitments, students that are also working, need to have that flexibility to fit their study around other aspects. They're not the same as undergraduate full-time students. So Christine will explain more about how each of the subjects are delivered. It's fantastic for us to tell you that the platform, the learning platform that the course is designed on is Canvas, which is a relatively new platform for our university. And it's one that we really chose because of the way that it is designed. It's very easy to navigate. It's very user-friendly. It also has a really fresh look and feel about it. So you can move between materials, between subjects across the platform. So of course, as you can see from the photo of Tom, one of our practitioners in the course, the flexibility also allows you to be able to study where and when you can. So it's very easy to access. Thank you, Christine. I might hand over to you now to explain about Laura's project. Thank you, Christine.
Yes, this is something really exciting. We kicked off in the middle of last year and it's going really well. One of the criticisms of the graduate certificate in migration law and practice was that the graduates weren't coming out with oral skills. They'd learned how to give written advice to clients, but they weren't very good at actually speaking to them and giving that advice orally. So that's the aim of our project, to develop our student skills in interviewing clients and providing oral advice. And we start right from the outset with that. So we've got lots of materials, really interesting materials available to help prepare for our workshops. At the moment, we're only doing our workshops online because of COVID, which is a bit of a shame. Some of the students would prefer to have the opportunity to attend on campus. But at this stage, for autumn session at least, we're only slotted in for online workshops. But those workshops are all about practicing interviews, putting your interview skills into practice, so that by the time you complete the final subject, you will have had a number of opportunities to practice giving advice to a client orally rather than just in writing. And we're very fortunate to be collaborating with Laura because she's doing a research project on how migration professionals interact with their clients. So she will be sharing the results of her research. We're participating in the research. Some of our students have opted in, and to her project, we're participating with it. But she'll be sharing the results of her research, and hopefully we'll all benefit from that. So yes, these are our workshops. So they normally we do have an optional on-campus workshop for our first 4 subjects, and they've only ever been online for the last 2. But at this stage, they're all going to be online this session. The 78305 workshop is on a Thursday night, but the others are all on a Saturday, not necessarily Saturday morning, but on a full Saturday. And I've already mentioned our Capstone Assessment preparation, and I noticed there was a question there in the Q&A about the low pass rate in the Capstone, so it's probably a good opportunity to talk about some of the issues with the Capstone. So there's no doubt that there were issues with the Capstone that was originally provided by the College of Law. We have been advocating very strongly for changes to that, to the format, to the lack of transparency, to what our graduates perceived as some quite unfair aspects to the Capstone. But about August or perhaps last year, the College of Law gave notice to the Department of Immigration or Department of Home Affairs that they weren't going to continue offering the Capstone assessment. So there's a tender process on the go right at the moment. It closes on the 3rd of February, and the department are hoping to have appointed the new provider in March, and for the first Capstone assessment to be offered by the new provider in April. So for you guys looking at starting in autumn or perhaps even in spring, you're really fortunate because you will have a number of groups go ahead of you to help with any teething problems and iron out some of the issues. The pass rate for the previous Capstone assessment was very concerning. It was very low. Now, I'm pleased to say that the pass rate of our students was much higher than the overall pass rate that's reported. That rate is reported on the MARA website. That information provided on the MARA website applies to all the candidates. And when it first started, there were very few candidates who were successful initially because there weren't any graduate diploma students sitting at that stage. They were all students or candidates who had completed the graduate certificate a long time ago, and they didn't register in time to be able to use their graduate certificate. So they had the option, if they could prove that they met the knowledge requirements by passing the Capstone, they had that opportunity, but it was really difficult for them. One reason for that is that the Capstone tests the occupational competency standards, and they weren't even taught in the graduate certificate. So I did feel very sorry for those people. And then there were lots of changes that were made. More time was given, less questions were asked. The whole format of the capstone sort of changed by the final session. But at this stage, we don't know who the new provider is going to be, and we don't know what format their capstone will be. So as I say, you guys are really in a fortunate position, because by the time you're ready, by the time you graduate and are looking at sitting the capstone, there will have been 3 or 4 groups of our graduates gone ahead of you. And although they're not allowed to share the specific content of the capstone, they certainly give us lots of good tips, and they come along to that capstone strategy online class that's mentioned there, and talk about how they prepared for the capstone and what was useful and what wasn't useful, all those sorts of things. So at the moment, our capstone assessment preparation program is based on the sample papers that we managed to get the College of Law to agree to provide. Now, the great thing is that as part of the tender process for the new provider, they must provide sample papers straight away. So we'll have access to those sample papers as soon as the provider gets set up and running. And so we may make some changes to our preparation program, or possibly we'll add it to give you even more opportunity to practice lots of different things. So the previous capstone involved a multiple choice question quiz, short answer questions, and some practical written tasks. So letters of advice to clients, and a submission to the department, perhaps on a waiver. Now, we offer our students practice interviews, specific practice interviews in 78305. So all through the program, because of our Communicating with Clients project, you're getting lots and lots of material on oral skills, and you have the opportunity to participate in those workshops. But by the time you get to 78305, there's actually a week where you do practice interviews, and then you have an opportunity to repeat them for a teacher in the online workshop. Those students who don't do the approved internship actually do an oral exam, which involves a discussion with, it's actually Tom, he's your marker, your assessor. So that involves a discussion with him as to how you would approach the interview with the client, what type of information you need to obtain from the client to be able to provide some advice of what type of advice you might be able to give. Then there's the actual client interview, and then you follow up with a file note. So students who opt for the internship, it is basically 70 hours over, there's normally a 3 to 4 week window. Basically, you have to have completed all 24 modules in the program before you're let loose as an intern. And then you'll complete that. So some students do it over 10 days, some do it over 20 half days. There'll be plenty more information about that. So most students actually organise their own placements, but we do have a small database of hosts who are available. Basically any host that we've had in the past. I don't think any have said that they weren't happy to take another one of our students. And we've had some really successful outcomes with our students being offered jobs to stay on. Even if they're not registered yet, they can still do, there are some administrative functions that they can perform and research they can carry out. And of course, once they get registered, then they can actually move up and become a migration agent, migration advisor in the firm. Another thing that's worth knowing with the internship, and I've probably got another slide on this coming up. Another thing worth knowing though is if you're already working in the field, if you're already working for a migration advisor, it's fine to do your internship there, even though you're actually being paid for working there. That's no problem at all. So here we go. That's what I just said. So if you're already working in the field, you can complete with your employer, so it can be paid or unpaid, but the experience that you gain will be absolutely invaluable. And our students who were more confident with the capstone invariably were students who had done an internship. Everyone's always pleased to know there are no 100% exams. So we have a number of graduate attributes, as Maxine mentioned. attributes that once you graduate, you are expected to have. And we use different types of assessment tasks to test that. In all subjects, actually, you can earn marks for participation, which is great because it's not about content, it's not about getting it right, it's just about having a go and participating in discussions, completing practice quizzes, doing some peer review. Our exam, it says oral exam, so we call it an oral exam in 78305. In the earlier subjects, we call it the oral component of the practice file. So your practice file, you have a couple of non-assessable tasks. Then you have one written practice file, and you'll get your feedback on that. And then you basically, the oral component is providing that same advice that you gave in your letter of advice or memo, whatever it was, to the assessor, who will either be playing the role of a client or your supervisor, depending on the type of matter it is. And that's really great in that you will have the opportunity to get feedback on your written document and implement that feedback before you do the oral component. And then we finish up with another written component. Have lots of online discussions, lots of case studies. Students are always saying, find it really interesting, actually looking at real life stories. And although occasionally I have people say to me, that can't possibly be true, but yes, truth can certainly be stranger than fiction sometimes. There are some amazing case studies out there that we look at. And of course, we try to find interesting ones for you. So lots of different tasks and activities, not necessarily all accessible on their own, but they'll be part of the participation mark if they're not part of the practice file, accessible practice file. All right, back to you, Maxine.
Many thanks, Christine. So here we are back where I am this evening at the university, and you can see here, and for those of you that might be living in Sydney, you might have had the opportunity to see this new building that we moved into about 12 months ago on Parramatta Road, just opposite the new Central Park. So what I really like to impress upon students that are undertaking an online course is that you are, of course, have the same access and support services as if you were a student in a face-to-face capacity. So I know that's not possibly helpful to those students who live outside of Sydney, but certainly for those that are living in Sydney, you are able to access the services, physical services at the moment that we have here. So we have student spaces in this brand new building too, which the law faculty are in the top 3 floors. In the same building, building 2 is also the library, and there is lots of student spaces. So you can book rooms to study if you wanted to form a study group, and Christine might talk more about the importance of having a study group. You can use any of the other facilities. During the week we have food courts, etc. If you're here on the weekend, though, of course, there's lots of great food places around the university. If you are a student that's not living in Sydney, but you do come to Sydney, and as Christine's mentioned, we do from time to time have, other than in COVID time, have some on-campus workshops for some of the subjects, and you're obviously very welcome to come here. But if you are, as I said, outside Sydney, but you happen to be coming to Sydney for any reason, then the UTS University is part of where you are very welcome to attend. Similarly, if you are a student that needs assistance from the library, you can access the library remotely and access the librarians remotely as well. There are other services that the university provides that you can also access remotely. Thank you, Christine. So again, this is university and faculty services available to all students, regardless of whether you are doing an online course or a face-to-face course. So we are very lucky in the law faculty to have the role of Director of Students. And as you can see on the slide, Professor Tracy Booth is our Director of Students. from this year. Tracy is a very experienced academic, and the role of a director of students is to really be the face of the faculty, that someone that the students you can speak to, you can contact, you can have meetings with by phone, by using technology. And Tracy will work with you around any concerns that you might have about your study. And now, as Christine has explained and has really promoted with you the importance of undertaking the graduate diploma in quite a slow stage, that would be something that Tracy would also recommend. So whilst it might be a fairly short course with 6 subjects, it's still one that you want to ensure that you have, the learning of each subject to build on the following subjects. Tracy can also give you advice if something happens to impact on your study and you want to take a leave of absence, for example. You might need to apply for special consideration if something has impacted on your ability to study. So Tracy is the person that knows the university, knows the faculty, and knows the support services that are available to you. That's a faculty resource. Across the university, we have UTS Helps and Careers. So UTS Helps is there really very much designed for students who haven't studied before or haven't studied for a long time, are feeling a little bit anxious about coming to study, if not quite sure what an assessment task might mean, if they've got to do a presentation, not quite sure how that should start. So Helps have the ability to access their materials as remote learners, and also they have a very good, easy to follow resources online, so you can look them up and see what's available, as well as have the opportunity to meet with some of the consultants in Helps. And then finally, and Christine's worked very hard with our career service over the last couple of years to provide opportunities for students, whether that be through advertising an internship or whether it be through advertising positions for graduates. So the career service does that in terms of migration law and practice, but it also has some very good resources, and including the ability to speak to careers consultants around those skills when applying for jobs, about putting a CV together, about interview skills, about how to look for a job, how to prepare for job interviews. So they're available to all our students, and those resources are also available online so that you can get that bit of a start, build some confidence, ask some questions in a very safe space across the faculty and the university to support your studies. And then finally, we have here, I know there's been a couple of questions through the webinar as to the fees. So you can see what the fees are here on this slide for 2021. And we've got local domestic students as well as our international students. So you're doing in the graduate diploma 6 subjects. Each subject is 6 credit points. What is really good about that is the subjects follow a very similar model that is aligned with the MARA competency. So you know what to expect in every subject. The fees are charged on a credit point basis. So it's quite straightforward, and you can see information about fee help on the link that's given to the website there. If any of you have done a study with us, whether it be an undergraduate or a postgraduate course before, if you're a UTS alumni, you're also able to get a 10% savings on your fees. Or if you do a graduate diploma with us and then you stay and possibly stay and do a law degree, a Juris Doctor, you'll receive 10% saving on the Juris Doctor, and you'll also receive some credit recognition for the subjects that you've studied in the graduate diploma.
Yes, may I just say quite a few of our graduates are swapping over to the JD. They've decided they had a taste for law and they like it, so that's great. And also just to clarify, that price there for domestic students is if you were doing 3 subjects per session, which we don't recommend. So it's a little bit confusing. So you can divide that by 2/3 if you were doing 2 subjects, or just 1/3 if you're only doing 1 subject in a session. You don't have to pay that full amount for 3 subjects if you're only doing 1 or 2. Would you like me to speak to this?
Yes,
because I want to encourage you, if you are interested in enrolling for this current session, don't delay, because our subject sites are available from the 15th of February and we actually start on the 22nd of February. So that week from the 15th to the 22nd is a really good opportunity to get a bit of a head start. So you don't want to be still sorting out your enrolment. And the other thing to remember, if you do enrol, is that we are on Canvas. So please don't wait for something to appear on UTS Online. You'll get lots of emails and lots of information about Canvas, but unfortunately we have some students who just miss it. And so Canvas it is. Now I'm going to go back to these questions that are in the chat box. Quite a few here. So the first question asks, with a current legal practicing certificate, there's no need to complete this course to register as a migration agent. That's right. And from March, if you have an unrestricted legal practicing certificate, you won't be able to register as a migration agent. Okay. Next question, do you need to attend every class? You don't have to attend classes live. So all classes are recorded so that you can watch them at your convenience. About half our students try to get to most classes. All the classes are in the evening. They are usually on a Wednesday or a Thursday night. Does UTS support the subscription access to LegendCom? Students in our program are eligible to use the UTS library subscription of LegendCom while you're still a student. And we're actually extending that. We've extended it so that our students who are studying for the Capstone still have access, but the College of Law did provide access to Legend towards the end of their time offering the Capstone, and we assume that the next provider will too. Previously, the Capstone was offered 4 times a year. There was a move to change it to 3 times because we have 3 sessions. We have students completing 3 times every year. So we don't know what the new provider will do. How is the Capstone Assessment completed in the past? It was all done online, but that doesn't mean the new provider must provide for remote as well, but they may also do face-to-face. How long is the internship? 70 hours minimum. So basically that's 10 full days. And there'll be a 3 or 4 week period that you can do that over. I'd like the pass rate of a MARA exam for UTS students last year. I'm sorry, we don't have that information because they're our graduates, so it's a privacy issue. The College of Law and the MARA didn't provide us. We can only rely on our graduates getting back to us and telling us whether they passed or failed. And so based on what they've told us, our students did much better than the 22 or 25% overall who passed. And yes, that question is that it has been really difficult for people. It was getting better, and this was a bit of a blip, having to get a new provider, but I'm optimistic that the new provider will hopefully provide a more fairer and transparent assessment. I'm an overseas lawyer. Am I eligible to practice as a migration lawyer without passing this course and passing Capstone just by assessing my bar certificate? You'd have to follow that up with MARA. You need an Australian practicing certificate, right? So if you don't have an Australian practicing certificate in Australian jurisdiction, then you would need to complete both the graduate diploma and the Capstone assessment. After assessing, am I eligible to work as a lawyer? I don't know. I'm not quite sure what that means, but Maxine could probably give you a lot more information than I can, but there's not a lot of reciprocal rights for lawyers. You would probably, even if your qualification was recognised, you'd probably still have to do the practical legal training. Is the recommended textbook available in the library? Yes, but most students actually buy it. It's especially our students in 78305. And the only reason for waiting is that there might be a new version by then. But if you're going to buy it, I think you may as well buy it early. Sorry, I can't answer the English question there. How much to finish the whole course? That would, well, based on current figures, it would have been about 2,800 for the 6 subjects. Where can I access information or be informed ongoing CPD? That's all on the MARA website. Is it possible to take 1 course per session and complete in 6 sessions? Yes, it is. So you don't have to take 2. So when the graduate diploma was recommended, the idea was that it would be either 12 months full-time, which means 2 subjects, and 2 subjects, not 3, or 18 months part-time. And the MARA and the industry have been quite critical that some students took advantage of the option that was open to them to enrol in 3 subjects per session, because UTS actually allows you to do even more than 36 credit points, but they don't know how hard this course is. And the point is that you guys have to get the most out of each and every subject to have some confidence when you're going into the capstone that you know what to do. All right, I think I've answered all those questions in the Q&A. Is there anything in the chat box that you need me to answer, ladies? Looks like Yanni and Ness have done a great job answering all those questions there. So if there aren't any additional questions, did I cover everything that we wanted to cover? All right, excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. Now, do we have a few more slides here? We have some connect with us information. Yeah, that's it. So thank you. Now you should have my email address. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me. Happy to help. But if you're thinking about starting in autumn, get your act together. Don't miss the start of the session, because we hit the ground running. There's lots to cover, because we have to cover everything that the MARA requires us to cover.
Thank you, Christine. If I could just add my thanks to Christine and the team for presenting such a clear webinar. As Christine's very generously given her email address, but if you have a more kind of administrative type question, you can also in the chat box take up the email law@uts.edu.au. So finally, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight, to putting aside some time and for giving this consideration, which we know is a very important decision that you make. And so if we encourage you, if you have made that decision, to enrol for autumn, but if you do want to think about it, then please keep in touch with us through our webpage to see when our further information sessions are. So thanks once again. Good evening and take care. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.